I love what's happening at the moment in technology advancements. I think the important thing for probably small operators, and we are all small operators, when you look at the big 7 or so technology companies around the world, they're pouring in billions at the moment. We can never compete with that. Pretty well everyone as a small operator are absolutely not in control of whether there'll be the bubble will burst or not. And if you're not in control of something, then I think you control the controllables you have, and you get involved in AI in terms of changes, in terms of its own technology. I in my view at the moment, you use it. You use the tools that are out there at the moment.
Ed Murphy, thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks, Connor. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
Can we start with Greentech HQ and the program that you have for SMEs? Let's just start there. What is it? What do you do? And we'll go from there.
Okay, great. In Greentech HQ, which is in Enniscorthy in Wexford, and obviously in the southeast, we came up with an idea about 2 years ago to start a program specifically to help SMEs that might be doing somewhere between 1 and maybe 5 million, to help them significantly scale their business. And we called the program BASE, Business Advantage and Sustainability Southeast. And we started a BASE program. We came up with the idea. We pitched it to Enterprise Ireland, who really liked it because they have a number of programs that they run for SMEs, but they really weren't getting traction in the regions for some of those programs. So they liked what we came up with, and they agreed to fund it to the extent of 80%. So what it means is if it costs to run the program, which in our case it did over 3 years, 1.25 million, they gave us €1 million towards running the program, meaning the companies that we brought on it would only have to pay 20% of the real cost of the program. So in that case, we brought on about 24 companies, and who all pay the cost of the program for them would be 20 grand a year, but they'd only have to pay 4 grand. So we brought on 24 companies. We've been working with them over the last year, and it's been a fantastic program in so many ways. I did it because I came up with the idea, having worked in franchising for many years. And I really struggled hearing what Enterprise Ireland or Leo or Skillnet Ireland are doing, running training courses, running programs or whatever. That might be a week, a month, 6 months. And I believed you could never really have an effect on a company in such short period of time. And coming from franchise, where we had franchise agreements that were 10 years, for instance, I believed you needed to work with a company for at least a few years to really have an impact on that company. So this is a 3-year program. That's as long as it would allow from Enterprise Ireland. It's a 3-year program that we work with each of the companies. But what we do is we take a company, for instance, who could have been a wonderful entrepreneur, great founder, hardworking, good ideas, maybe good product, but got to a certain point, be it 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, 5 million, where their system was in their head or their structure was not capable of scaling. And we took those companies, we brought them in, we investigated all of them individually, and they came from all sectors, didn't matter what sector. And we looked at every element of their business, every pillar of a business, from marketing to operations to funding to strategy, just every part of the business, HR, people, everything. And we looked for gaps that may have, that would have, those gaps were something that were needed in order to scale. It didn't matter what their ambition was, they weren't capable of scaling if they didn't have certain elements of the business in place. So we looked for the gaps, and in all cases found the gaps. And these were smart, intelligent, capable people that really nobody interrogated that business before and looked at it compared to maybe a business in a similar sector that might be doing 10 times that amount of business, and looked at what it needs to in order to scale.
And it just when you say we, who is it that's looking at the business?
I put a team together in Greentech HQ. I have a really strong person in strategy, really strong person in sales and marketing, really strong person in finance and funding. And then we brought in a few subject matter expert consultants in lean operations, in technology, in different areas. So between what we have in-house and between consultants that we brought on board specifically to help us with this program, we as a team together would look at each company individually and start working on it. And we bring all these companies together once a month. So before they came on the program, we told them, sorry, you're going to have to take a day, a month out of your business. You want to scale it. We asked them, are they ambitious? Do they want to grow? Do they want to double their business? And they all said yes, and say, okay, if you're prepared to sacrifice a day a month and come out of your business, we will work on it for you. So we bring them all together, and we interrogated the business first. Now we saw what was needed to do. And each day we concentrate on a different part of the business. Each day a month we concentrate on whether it's strategy, whether it's people management and people skills, whether it's financial management and funding, whatever it is. We concentrate on that. And we work on that. We bring all the companies together, we split them up into groups, and we work with them individually and in groups. And the program involves not only teaching and instructing, but it also involves peer-to-peer management. We put them into groups, and we get each of the founders, and it's only founders, and our managing directors, we get them all into groups where they work on each other, encourage each other, beat up on each other, challenge each other, help each other with things. So we facilitate peer-to-peer mentoring as well as our own instructions. And then we actually put a subject matter expert or successful entrepreneur from the EY program. We assign one of those to each of the SMEs that they can contact and talk to on a regular basis. So we just work with each of the companies. We go out and see them and check in with them. And so we work with it individually and as a group and in a peer-to-peer setting. They love it. They love particularly the peer-to-peer. They love coming together. They love the fact that, as an entrepreneur of a small business, it can be a lonely place. So they love the fact that they have a place to come to, a kind of a friendly place, an open place, a collaborative place. And they really enjoy different subject matter experts challenging and questioning what they're doing. And so it's turned into a real community of entrepreneurs that they really love and being part of.
And Ed, so you probably can't say specifically maybe, and if you could try to give an example of maybe one thing that one of these businesses has realized, a kind of a game changer for their business throughout the program. It might be hard to explain without going into detail, but are there any examples like that?
Yeah, there's probably examples in nearly all cases. I would suggest that we do we look at the infrastructure or of their company in terms of, just like any successful company, it's got to have a proper infrastructure, proper structure. And in nearly all cases, their structure was not appropriate and capable of scaling. So we, first of all, had to get their infrastructure right to make sure there was someone responsible for operations, someone responsible for marketing, someone responsible for technology, someone responsible for people management, whatever. Whether that was someone in-house or someone as a consultant or contract basis. But in nearly all cases, we changed their infrastructure. In nearly all cases. In most of the people's cases, they nearly all hired somebody. In some cases, some of the owners or managing directors of the company sacked themselves as a general manager, and got and moved aside, became a founder, and start working on the business from a different point of view, and brought in a general manager who is responsible for the day-to-day operations. That happened out of 24, probably in about 5 cases, which is a lot. I mean, we're talking about companies who may be operating 6, 7, 8 years. And for many of them to do that, I would say not one of them would have done it without our intervention. Not one of them. I'd say in all cases, we nearly changed how they did marketing. We really interrogated their marketing system, how they did it, who did it, how they either outsourced it or did it in-house. And nearly in all cases, we changed how they did it. And in many cases, they hired either on a contract basis or in a few cases on a full-time basis to brought in marketing managers or whatever. We also, I'd say in a number of cases, took on financial controllers. I'd say in at least 3 cases, they didn't believe it was necessary or whatever. We got them to change, and bring in financial controllers. In nearly all cases, we got them to do an investigation of their technology as to whether it was still appropriate, whether it's e-commerce, whether it's websites, whether it's their social media, whether it was their ERP system, whether it was appropriate, up to date, whatever. We work closely with the Walton Institute, which is part of Southeast Technical University, and we were able to, get them a grant for in the region of about 10 grand each to actually interrogate their technology, and in many cases change or upgrade or update or add to what they actually had in place. So many, many different examples of changes, infrastructural changes and upgrades to the companies.
Take me back to the start. So, I know you, right? Because you're a longtime business partner of my uncle Mick Carney.
Yep.
And that all started, as far as I know, with Snap. But in preparation for this interview, I had a look, and you had started initially as a kind of a general manager of a cleaning company in Florida. Is that right? Tell me about that and how you ended up there.
Yeah, I worked for a contract cleaning, contract catering, contract security company in Ireland. They bought a company in Florida in the USA, and I've been working with them here for a few years. So they asked me to go out and head up that operation in Orlando, in Florida. Really interestingly, when I was there, and I loved America, and I loved being there, but I loved how easy it was to do business there. I mean, it is a very business-friendly country, no matter what anybody says about America. It is, and I loved doing that. What I found in America, we went out and we got lots of contracts, sometimes huge contracts that might be €1 million contract per year or whatever. But I discovered a concept in America that I wasn't right away quite aware of. Having done business in college and marketing in college, I really didn't understand the franchising concept. And it came to me in America, and what we then discovered, we could employ a franchise concept to running a business. So when we got contracts in it was called Grosvenor Building Service. When we got contracts, it might be a large university, it might be like Kennedy Space Center, a big hospital, a naval base or whatever. When we got a contract, but instead of hiring all the staff and doing it ourselves, we would contract out or franchise out that contract to a local person who became the manager, and then we would charge them a royalty of 6% or 7% of doing it. But we get them in, and we got contracts all over the southeast part of the United States. And it was, I looked at franchise, thought, wow, what a great way to go. You build a system, you know how to do it, you put it all on paper, you create almost a business in a box and whatever, and you hand over how to do it to someone, and you help them start their own business in their own area. And I loved it, and it worked really, really well. And it saved me looking in Florida, flying all over the States to get contracts up and running, just hire the right people and do it. So I love that. And when I eventually, we had our first baby in Florida, and we decided, difficult decision to come back home to Ireland genuinely, because we loved it there. But I thought, well, if we're ever going to come home, we better come home now that we're starting a family. And so we came home. And I was about to start another franchise. I bought a franchise from the States. I was about to start it in Ireland. And I was struggling in 1992. I was struggling getting funding. It was quite a different country at that stage, quite a different financial situation. And I had enough money to get the business off the ground, but not enough money to keep it going for a year, should it take that to really get the show off the ground. And in that process, I was introduced to Michael Kearney, and not really wanting a job, but we chatted and talked. And at the time, Mick Kearney was looking for someone to help him run the franchise element of Snap Printing. And so we met, we liked each other, and we effectively did a deal. Look at it, if I worked at it for 6 months and we still liked each other at the end of 6 months, I would buy half the franchising business, the Snap franchising, that had the rights to Snap for Ireland. And that's what happened. And so loved working with Mick. He became not only a fantastic business partner, but best friend as well, and as we are to this day. And we work really well because Mick was probably the best, I would call it, operational manager of a Snap Printing or any printing in not only in Ireland but in the British Isles. He ran an amazing Snap Printing business out of Dame Street in Dublin, and Mick basically taught me everything there is to know about printing. But I suppose I worked very much with him as a franchisor, as a marketing. So my job was to run the system, the marketing system, and develop the network. And we opened up 24 franchise operations around Ireland. So that was my job. Whereas Mick, it was really easy for me to grow that network, because if anyone was looking at as a franchise opportunity, I'd just bring him into Dame Street and say, look, if you just emulate what's happening here, you'll be very successful. Just do what Mick does. You'll be very successful. And it was very easy. It's not easy to find that in franchising, but in Mick's case, it won the best franchised shop in the British Isles at the time and was the most successful. So it was very easy for me to do the network then, and I brought a lot of amazing people on as franchise owners in Snap Printing, grew what became the biggest, franchise and print business in Ireland. And it was really successful for many, many years. And probably the biggest downturn that came in printing, it coincided with everyone else getting color printers and things changing technically and from a technology point of view, but coincided with the downturn in the economy in 2009, 10 and 11. And both of those had a big effect on Snap, by which time, I suppose, I was starting to get bored and wanting to move on to something else and make a bit likewise and whatever, and so did. But we stayed with Snap for many years thereafter, and God brought in a fantastic partners to do that. And it's still today, Snap has just kept going through the tough times, kept growing, kept developing, and now is flying ahead again, which, brought in promotional products, brought in signage, brought in website development, whatever, and it's a fantastic brand that continues well into today. So I'm delighted for the new owners.
When I asked Mick was on this podcast a number of years ago, and when I asked him about the growth of Snap, he painted it as more difficult, say, than what happened with Home Instead later on. Can you tell me just maybe some, it sounds like, and he also said, by the way, it was just extremely successful, right? And that yourself and himself were a great team and you made it successful. But Can you talk maybe about some of the challenges you had growing that? I mean, was it as easy as look what Mick is doing and everyone wanted in, and then they started making
Yeah,
money?
and no, it's a good point, Connor. Looking back, you say it was all easy, and we just had to do A, B, and C, and it all worked. And absolutely, it wasn't. It was um like we developed and developed well, and it became quite successful. But it was real hard work. It was genuinely hard work. And what was hard about it was um, it was capital intensive. Um, at a certain time, we had to open up in places and streets, which it made the biggest commitment many franchise owners made to business wasn't even buying the franchise and that contract. It was taking on a lease that they may have had to buy into the lease. They may have had to spend 200,000 at a certain time on fitting out that premises, and they had to maybe spend 300,000 on the equipment for what looks like a little print shop, along a street. Suddenly there was huge investment in that. And what's really hard is at the time, technology, particularly in the printing area and the design area, was changing fairly drastically. New softwares coming on board, new technologies coming on board all the time, and then large corporates, which may be one of your best clients, suddenly they decided, well, we can do this ourselves. We'll buy a color machine that costs 60, 70 or 100 grand. We'll do a bit of this and whatever. So you were nearly getting your customers and nearly eventually teaching them how to do it themselves, and then they'd be gone. And then you had to move on to another customers, more customers. But technology, it was tough. It was expensive. The properties were expensive. And I mean, I worried all the time when we had franchise owners. It's always been kind of my belief that in a business, when you're moving when you need a property, it's better to rent it and stay viable, flexible, adaptable. If it becomes too big, you move out. If it becomes too small, you rent a different place or hire another place. Once you own it, it's not as easy to make those moves. The market could have gone up, it could have gone down, and whatever. So I don't like the idea of buying a business, buying the property that your business works out of. And for many people who do that, and they rent it personally, and they buy it personally and rent it at the company, many people that do that, it can work out very well. And I know cases that have worked out exceedingly well. But for most cases, it didn't work out well. And it affected their business for the wrong reason. Property became the reason that the business didn't do well. They were in the wrong place, or the business or the property was weighing them down in terms of the cost of mortgages and whatever. So that was difficult. And it was difficult for us when we had the franchise. At the time, property was going upwards. And all our franchise owners who were paying rents at certain times said, look, we got to buy, we got to find a place, we got to buy. And it was actually hard for Mick and I to actually stop franchise owners who were doing well, profitably and whatever, going and buy their own property. So we almost had to let go and let them go. And in many cases, they worked out very well. And in many cases, they didn't work out very well. But it's a difficulty, for a lot of business people. The owner, do you buy? Do you rent, or do you play a premises? And I take a bit of a lead from what big companies do, large corporates do, banks do, and whatever. And most of them don't own their property. They might build them to specification, but they would rather somebody else owned it and they just rent it out, and they just kept that flexibility. And I kind of but so it was complex. Snap printing wasn't simple. It was a complex business. And then you have all the franchising. We had to be a little bit ahead of the game of most people in terms of teaching companies how to market themselves and had to have good design. So we always had to stay ahead of the game in terms of good marketing, good design, good operations and whatever. And so it wasn't easy. And it was real hard work. It was very most of those franchise owners, they didn't do 40 hours a week. They were doing 50 and 60 hours a week. And effectively, Mick and I had to do that 50 or 60 hours a week with them. We always had to be available to them. So it absolutely wasn't easy. It was great fun. It was a great journey, made great friends for life. It was just wonderful in many ways, but it wasn't easy.
When you learned about the franchise model, right, you said you kind of, wow, this is an amazing way to kind of grow a business. There are some businesses, I suppose, out there that they're never, maybe they could franchise, but they're never going to be franchises.
Yeah.
What can businesses that won't ever become franchises, what can they learn from the franchise model?
It's a great question, Conor. Genuinely, it's a great question. And for anyone listening here, I'm going to recommend a book. And the book is called The E-Myth, the E-Myth. And E stands for entrepreneurial. So it's the entrepreneurial myth. And it talks about people who start a business. And many of those same people should never have started a business because they may have got pissed off with the boss, or they may feel like they could do it themselves better than what's been done in that company, or something else happens that they start a business. And then they start a business and they work their ass off, whether it's building or doing this or an engineering company or whatever. And then find that they almost feel I can make, better life for myself. I can, make more money, whatever. But they find if they haven't started business for the right reasons, they only end up creating what is probably the worst job in the world, a job that they can't take holiday, they can't get sick. And they start a business and they think I can do it better myself. I'll do it myself. And, whether you're a carpenter or an engineer or a doctor, it doesn't matter. When you don't know how to run a business properly with proper structures, proper system, proper goals and whatever in place, you end up just working your ass off and yourself. And it's basically telling people who have that entrepreneurial bug to start a business, don't start it unless you know what that business will look like when you're finished with it, or when you've grown it for 5 or 6 or 7 years. And you almost start it with the end in mind and creating the right systems and structures and people in place. So it is in the E-Myth, it actually does exactly what you've just asked. It tells and advises companies or people how to build a business that looks like a franchise. Because it would say that the best business to start is a franchise business, because it's got a business in a box. It's looked at every element of the business and put a structure and a system to every part of it. I mean, the most obvious one in the world is McDonald's. I can guarantee anyone who goes into work for McDonald's, there's only one way to make fries. There's only one way to serve a customer. There's only one way to do many different things. And they're taught how to do it. And you don't go outside that system. They know the system works. And if someone comes in, you come from a nice restaurant and say, look, McDonald's, I know you do what you do, but you know what? I'm world class at making burgers. I do it and whatever. I'm going to do it my way. McDonald's will tell them to go F off and say, you're going to do it our way, or you're not going to do it at all. And really, that's what franchise is about. It's a system that works. That is not to say a franchise doesn't evolve and is not dynamic. Of course it does, but it keeps looking at it. And I remember all my times in franchising, whenever we come up with a new idea, just take your snap printing, whether it's a new machine or a new way of doing something or a new marketing approach or whatever, we would always pilot it in 1 or 2 places. And that idea might fall over, and then we tell the rest of them, don't do it. It doesn't work. Or it might work exceedingly well, and then we're telling all of them at our next meeting, you need to do this. But so that's what's great about franchising. We're all in, and we take the best ideas and we enhance and work those really hard. So I think the E-Myth it's by a guy called Patrick Gerber. And it's a fantastic book, but it's basically teaching SMEs to structure, systemize their business in a way like a franchise that will really work for them. And that's kind of what I'm doing in our base program in Greentech HQ. trying to systemize their business, trying to put in the right structures, the right system, and then drop in the right people into those systems, and you have a chance of scaling beyond what you'd be capable without those structures, systems, and people.
What excites me about the kind of franchise model, right, when I think about it is, and you can correct me, right, if I'm kind of wrong in my thinking here, but as a franchisor, you have someone who essentially has their own business, right? So they're incentivized very much. They're aligned perfectly with the HQ, if you like, you know. And that part of franchising is very exciting because it's always like, I don't have to work out how to motivate someone I'm hiring because they're self-motivated because it's their own business. Can that be brought into businesses that aren't franchises, do you think?
Yes, it certainly can. It certainly can, but very difficult, Connor, to do it. It certainly can. And actually, in a new business that I have at the moment, we are endeavoring to do that. But it's wonderful starting a franchise and a franchise network and bringing in those self-motivated people who really don't know what they want to do. They just know they want to work hard and they want to build up an asset and make good money for themselves and their family. So it was great bringing franchise owners on board. And I mean, I certainly, and the more confident I became from Snap moving into the like of Home Instead, senior care and whatever, more confident to say, look, we have a system, it works. And Connor, if you want to join it, you come in and you do it exactly what you tell you. If you have your own ideas, go take a hike, go start your own business. But if you want to do, we know it works. Now you can go back to me in a year's time and say, you know, the way you're doing this, I have a better way of doing it. Grand, that's okay. But at the start, we say, my job when I start off someone in a franchise is get them to break even point as quickly as possible. And we had in all our cases a system that would get people to break even point. And I tell you, come back with your good ideas when you're breaking even and you're making some money rather than when you're losing money in those first number of months. So I would say it's great bringing those people on board that are self-motivated and you give them a system and a structure to do it. They do it and suddenly it works. And that's been great. And it's worked. Like we pretty well, had 100% success rate in franchising, starting off franchise owners in Snap and Home Instead, which is incredible for people starting a business. And that's, I would say to people starting a business today, like if it's my daughters want to start a business, if I could find a franchise in the sector that they want to go into, I would get them to buy a franchise. Why? Sometimes, now you could say you could make more money on its own. Well, you could also go broke far quicker on your own. But also, it gives someone starting a business for the first time, it gives them disciplines and structures and systems and ways of operating a business that no matter where they go in the career thereafter, that those disciplines and systems will stand to them. So I think it's a great way to go in. But answering your question, if it's not a franchise, how do you do it? Thus far, I would say the only way to do it, and as I say, we're trying to do that in another business we have at the moment, and that is systems. Put in the right structures from the start. It's structured as if it's a franchise, and don't think that anybody new staff coming into know exactly what to do. Tell them how to do it, no matter how little that operation is or that item that they have to do is. No matter what it is, write it down, put it into a system, give them an operations manual and tell them exactly what to do, how to do it and whatever. That's first of all. Also having really good values, having a really good mission, having a really good goals, having really good strategy, and share that with everybody involved so that you get buy-in, let's say. But then thereafter, you have to come up with something outside of, in terms of the incentive. We in the current system at the moment that we have leaders at different elements of the business, and you have to, beyond getting a good wage, you have to give them an incentive, a financial incentive, as to if I build my part of this business in Kildare or Galway or whatever, I am rewarded for doing so. And we're doing that. And I think that needs to be done with the leaders in whatever business that you're doing, the senior management team or the regional manager team or whatever it is. You have to put a financial system as well as the non-financial part of it, like, good training, put them on a nice training program, let them know we value you and we're actually going to help you develop your own career and incentivize you to grow and whatever. So some of those things that need to come, that came from franchising, that we're trying to do in a normal non-franchise business.
I want to talk about home instead, right, in a minute. But before we do, I spoke to Mick about previously when he was on the podcast about PrintOrigin.com.
Yeah.
And sorry to bring this up, but
don't worry about that. There's a few PrintOrigin.coms.
Well,
I call it to PrintOrigin.bomb.
Okay. Yeah. Well. Okay. So, Ted, could you? What happened with PrintOrigin, and I suppose what did you learn from it?
I'm a really big believer. The more I age, I'm a big believer in you start a business and if you're going to fail or if you're going to succeed, you succeed faster, you fail faster, and you move on. And in PrintOrigin.com, it was a case of we failed fast and moved on. But Mick and I, we were in the print industry, and I don't know whether Mick or I take credit for coming up with an idea that we had, which it was in that .com era. Even though what we were developing wasn't a .com business, it was a technology business. We came up with an idea whereby for anyone proofing printed material, you could do it online rather than having to send it to designer back forward 6 times and whatever. We came at an online way of doing it. And we need to develop a technology to do that. It also had a facility whereby if you, let's say one of our biggest customers in that case was Bank of Ireland, they were buying, let's call it, take a simple case, business cards from 10 different snap printing centers. We had come up with a way where we would group all of those business cards and do it at one time and be able to do it for a fraction of the cost of doing it, because all the orders would come in from different locations. They would all end up in one place. We could print them up on a major sheet, chop them down, cut them down, and we'd be making as much money, but they'd be saving a fortune.
And Ed, considering how things have panned out over the last,
it was a great idea. By the way, by the way, the idea, no issue with the idea, none whatsoever. It was a great idea. It was believe it or not, it was an idea that time had not come. We were ahead of the game. It was a good idea. It was the right idea. No question about that. When we came up with the idea, at that time, we got a couple of investors to invest in it. And we went out, we got some investment. Mick and I put money ourselves into it. Genuinely a good idea. What we weren't prepared for, obviously, it ended within 2 years when the .com bubble burst, and we got investment in, but we realized as we were developing this technology, but if we had 3 million put into it, it needed 6, 7, 8 million to do it, and we had no chance. And when the .com bubble burst, anyone with any technology going out looking for money was gone, and we didn't have more money to put into it to develop it further. So it just came to an end abruptly, and we were very unlucky in that we had someone who wanted to buy in it, who was Bertelsmann from Germany, who were the biggest both print buyer and print seller in the world, or certainly in Europe at the time. And they wanted to buy in, but they were coming over to sign agreements on the 12th of September 2001, and September 11th happened in 2001, and they said, deals off, and they were coming over, and that would have saved the company at that time. But look, these type of things happen. But I suppose, it went wrong. Lots of other business have went wrong for such reasons. What we learned from it, one of the things I learned from it, first of all, I found it really hard work because I came out of Snap Printing and I acted as CEO for PrintOrigin. I found it really hard because before that, I was used to building businesses from the ground up, startups. Effectively, all the franchises and all I did were effectively small companies, SMEs that you built from the ground up, and you applied all the best basics of a business. Suddenly, we were in a crazy business that before you made money, you went out and spent unbelievably. And this is the advice. And I suppose both Mick and I, we jumped into this and we didn't really understand big technology and global technology business. And suddenly we were pulled into a global technology business and we were selling something all around the world. We had offices in Germany, France. I spent a lot of time running over and back to America, UK. We had staff. We were advised by, our consultants, Gartner at the time. You just build a prototype of this product and you go selling it now. And because we had investors, they want to get in and get out, VCs in a few years and make multiples of that and whatever. And we were thrown into an area. We just want to develop a nice technology that would be good. But suddenly we were with VCs and on board, we were basically almost told how to run the business. And we weren't comfortable and we didn't know it and we struggled with it. We both struggled with it. And because we came from a completely different place. And it was a crazy, year and a half or so that we were pretty well say, you got to do this, you got to do that. So I certainly felt that a lot of times I wasn't in control of my own destiny. And I would probably say that again, if I was ever, in a business that I felt out of control in terms of the expenditure, what I was doing, I'd run a mile. I just, I felt there was other consultants telling us how to run the business, how to build it and where to spend the money and offices to open and whatever. And that would have been one of my lessons, that I wouldn't like to hand over control to consultants and whatever anymore. There's a lot of principles in building a business, and I think you need to stick to those and stick to what you know yourself.
We're, I suppose, in another boom, if you like, similar to the .com now, right? With AI and everyone, there's all talk about whether it's a bubble or an infrastructure bubble and all this stuff going on. From your experience with PrintOrigin, is there anything you might be able to say to someone that might be getting
excited?
Excited, distracted potentially? Is there anything there? Was there anything that you could have known beforehand that would have stopped you from going into it?
I think probably the whole area taking VC money on board. I would, we should have just got angel money on board, and we come into a VC world that we didn't know too quick, too early, and we shouldn't have gone there. And we handed over so much control so quickly. And if it had succeeded, by the time people were coming on board and investing in it, even if we'd succeeded, there wouldn't have been much money in it for Mick and I by the end of it, because we almost had to take on so much so quick. But probably at the moment, it's very interesting. By the way, I love what's happening at the moment in technology advancements, and I'm always, I love the future. I love talking about the future. I love change and whatever. So I'm very much interested in what's happening at the moment. I think the important thing for probably small operators, and we are all small operators, when you look at the big 7 or so technology companies around the world, they're pouring in billions at the moment. We can never compete with that. And we are, and small operators, and I'm saying pretty well everyone is a small operator, are absolutely not in control of whether there'll be the bubble will burst or not. And if you're not in control of something, then I think you control the controllables you have, and you get involved in AI, but you get involved, you know, in my view, you keep taking steps. I think there's no excuse for a company not learning, not appreciating, not starting to use, not starting to embed AI in the business. No excuse whatsoever. But in terms of investing in it, hugely, in terms of changes, in terms of its own technology, in my view at the moment, you use it. You use the tools that are out there at the moment. Use them as much as you can. Take advantage of. Bring someone in, an expert in AI, if there's any of them out there. There's a lot of people claiming to be experts. I'm not sure how many of them are really good, but I would say get involved, get doing it, get using it, try and take advantage of the automation that it brings and whatever. But I'd be afraid to invest and go up against, all the major companies that are in at the moment and start throwing millions into it. I think you just start playing with it, start using it, and I think it's great, and I think it'll make enormous difference in nearly every sector. And we all know about the shortcomings, the issues, the security. We all know about that, and hopefully our governance, our governments, our EU will keep tabs on that all the way along. But from a business point of view, I certainly think everyone, and particularly every founder or everyone running a business should, if they're not involved, should start getting involved, get some training, get some advice, get some consultancy, but get involved at the moment. I love it. I think it's great. My only advice is don't spend millions on it. That would be my whole thinking, because you're not in control whether there'll be a burst or not. None of us are.
How did Home Instead come about then? So you'd been in SAP, as you said, you were maybe getting a little bit bored at this stage and things had gone really well. How did Home Instead come about?
Yeah, I suppose, Conor, and maybe this is with a lot of entrepreneurs, and that is, I almost feel that I've about, you talk about the 7-year itch, I've about a 7 to 10 year itch, that it doesn't matter how well things are going. I just feel like, God, I want to live life. I want to try new things and all of that. And maybe that's what happened when we tried PrintOrigin. That didn't work. But when that didn't work, I went back into Snap with my tail between my legs and said, okay, we better keep the show on the road here. And thank God we had Snap Printing to go back to. But within another few years, Mick and I, we said, okay, we need to do something else again. So we went out and we bought a couple of other franchises, not just one franchise system. We bought another one called Contours Express, which was a ladies' fitness franchise from the States. We started that and we opened up about 13 locations. And during that process, we realized we didn't really like it that much. And we didn't think it's turned into the type of business we wanted. And luckily, the person who provided us the equipment for that really liked it. And he came and said, can I buy it or get involved? And thank God he did, because we were very happy to sell, and we sold that out fairly quickly.
Is that still around?
No, I think it's gone at this stage.
Yeah.
Like Curves and whatever, it's kind of had its day. But and then we did that. But at the same time, literally in the same few months, we bought Home Instead franchising. Home Instead Senior Care. There was no private home care company in Ireland at that time. It was all done by the HSE, called it Home Help. And I had just done my research around the world, and it was quite successful in the States and doing very well. And so Mick and I went out to the head office in Omaha, Nebraska, really liked the people, really liked what we're doing, and decided to buy the franchise and set it up in Ireland. And I was living in Stillorgan, Leopardstown at the time, and the nearest office available to my house of 5 minutes was in around right beside the Lep Inn. So I set up the first office of Home Instead there. And it was very interesting at the time because there was no outsourcing by the HSE. So we had to do it all privately. But that worked pretty well. We got, I suppose, referrals from the HSE of people that they weren't able to look after, and then a number of those people were able to pay for it privately. So we built our business in the first few years on private lines. But then after a few years, the HSE start recognizing, geez, these guys are doing good work and we can't get to everybody. So would you take on clients? So we start getting HSE clients. And then a number of other companies came into the industry, also franchises from America and England, like Bluebird, like Comfort Keepers, and they saw there's a real market there. So they joined us in it, and we together then we were making waves and doing good promotions, and the HSE more and more came to start using us, and eventually came up with a tender to outsource some of the work, and we won that tender, and we developed on from there. And then as we did that, we were going well in Leopardstown. Again, we put huge effort into that one place to make it world class, and we did, and we made it world class. There was 650 offices, franchise locations in the States at the time. We were the first in Ireland, and within 3 to 4 years, it became the number one franchise location in the world. And so we grew very successfully there. But then people saw us from all over Ireland and said, God, this sounds like a good business. So we started 24 locations in Ireland, 100% success rate in business, and it just grew very well. But again, it was a well-oiled machine and a really structured system that developed.
Was taking it in from the States, like it must have operated, as you were saying there with the HSE, it operated differently here. Was
Yes.
that hard to figure out?
Yeah, no. I think it's a good point, Connor, that you have. We took a system from the States whereby it was all private, and it's still in the States. Home Instead is all private still. There's no state intervention, really. So when we came here, we did operate like the States, all private, but there were certain things that would not work here in Ireland that did work in the States. So luckily, Mick and I, having run franchises before, we appreciated that there's always subtle differences in each country, that you need to tweak a franchise. Whether it's McDonald's, a McDonald's in Atlanta is not quite the same as a McDonald's in Dublin. Subtle differences, but important differences. And that's why franchises from around the world, they often sell what they call master franchises for the country, because they recognize someone in that country will make tweaks that they'll know how to make it work specifically in that country. And then, like as time went on and the HSE got involved and started using us, the Americans, for instance, thought we were crazy working with the HSE. Don't work with the government, or a pain in the butt. They won't pay you. It'll bring down the quality of care. It'll do this, it'll do that, it'll do the other. They didn't like us taking on work from the government in Ireland. That's the way it did. But we saw subtle differences, and we tweaked things specifically for Ireland. And having been in franchising, we understood how to do that. We were lucky that we did. For instance, someone who didn't come from a franchise background bought the franchise for Home Instead in the UK, and they did it exactly like the States, and did what they were told exactly like the States, and they just about fell over because they didn't know the subtle changes you had to make for the UK market. We did, and it worked very well. But I think that's important. A little difference in franchising when you go from country to country. For instance, the state was very involved here. How it was recommended here by public health nurses. They didn't have public health nurses like that in the States, so it didn't operate the same, and so we had to be conscious and capable of making the tweaks needed to actually fit into the Irish system.
So you understood franchising obviously really
Yes.
well. But when I think about printing, it's kind of B2B, manufacturing nearly, and customer service almost. And then you look at Home Instead, which is healthcare. I suppose there's a patient at the end of it, whether you're dealing with the HSE,
Yeah.
there's always a patient at the end. They're kind of different worlds. Was that a big learning curve to
No,
go?
no, Connor, it wasn't a big learning curve. Honestly, it genuinely wasn't a big learning curve. And I suppose that's what I'm kind of employing today in my learnings from that in Greentech, and how I deal with helping SME companies structure and systemize and grow. Because no matter what, there's certain pillars of a business that need to apply no matter what business you're running. Whether it was a service-based or product-based, whether it was, B2B or B2C, um, you still have to have, you still have to build your mission, your vision, your values, your proper strategy to go after the market. You still have to identify who is your potential customers, B2B or B2C, and you still need to identify them. You need to segment the market. It doesn't matter where it is. And then you need to come up with an appropriate marketing plan and a sales plan to actually get those type of customers. That's in marketing. But in every other part of it, the nice thing about when we started Home Instead versus Snap Printing, we got an operations manual for Home Instead that dealt with every element of the business, every pillar of the business. And we just had to implement that operations manual, just like we had a Snap Printing operations manual. So I don't care what business you're in. What I'd nearly like to see every business create, almost the founder come out of the business for enough time to build their own operations manual. I just literally chatted to, as I was coming into here this morning, I chatted to a really good entrepreneur who has a business, and he just said the same thing as a number of people said to me: the system is in my head. And I said, Damien, you need to get it the hell out of your head, it onto paper. And he said, you have no chance of building this business unless you get it onto paper, get a structure, and put people behind it. You can't go any further. So I think many business and entrepreneurs or whatever, their system and their structure is in their head. And that's a real dangerous place to be, because eventually that founder is going to run out of energy, is going to run out of steam, adrenaline or whatever, and maybe patience, that things are not happening as quick as they want them to happen. And when that happens, the business is probably going to start going backwards because they don't still have the same energy to keep going as they maybe once had for the first few years of the business. So I think really, I think it's so important in terms of scaling a business to systemize it, to structure it, and get it into an ops manual.
What about the change in risk? So if you get a company's board pack or something you're printing wrong, okay, there's obviously, you might lose a client, it could be it damage your reputation. If a nurse gets a medication wrong or something and it damages the health of someone, you've got what I would consider a bigger problem, right?
Yes, you have. Yeah.
Did that worry you at all going into?
You know what? No, it didn't worry me too much, Connor, because it would have worried me if I looked at Home Instead in the States and decided Ed Murphy, I'd go home and I'd start Ed Murphy Home Care and I'd take on that risk and myself. But to be honest, I had people in the States that I could ask, I could call any time of the day or night and say, I have this situation, how do you deal with it? I have that situation, how do you deal with it, and whatever. Now, the risk wasn't as great as you might imagine. We were really doing non-medical care. So yes, we would give medication, but only give the medication that we are directed to give. In other words, a blister pack was put out and said, you take a green and a red tablet first thing in the morning, and a blue and a yellow one at lunchtime or whatever. So somebody else had made the decision what medication the person is taking. So we didn't have to make that decision. So really there wasn't huge risk in Home Instead. It was very much non-medical care, and that's grand. Obviously, if you go into medical care, the risks grow much higher, and we never went there. And so therefore, that was much easier, particularly when you start franchising out and you open up an office in Kerry and Donegal and whatever. You don't want to be sitting at home, worrying, as you go to bed at night or after a few glasses of red wine, could something happen in a different part of the country that we can't control. So no, the risks weren't as high as imagined. Yes, we have our insurance in place. Yes, we take all the precautions and all of that, but it wasn't enormously risky as you can imagine. Once you stick by the system, once you do what you're supposed to do and don't go outside it, then there wasn't huge risk.
Both Snap and Home Instead were obviously very successful businesses for you. Did you have goals, or did you think about them at the start? We'd like to get to X number of franchises or a certain revenue level with either of the businesses, and did you kind of get there?
Yeah, I think taking those two businesses, and by the way, Conor, don't let me say there was PrintOrigin, but there was a few other little failures along the way as well that we're involved in. So don't think that we're perfect human beings and we get it right all the time. And we, to be fair, and I huge respect for making in one way, and PrintOrigin was an example of that, and I've had a few other examples. I think it's important as an entrepreneur as well to if you fail fast and move on, and recognize that this ain't working, and decide. Sometimes it's as brave a decision to stop as it is to start, and sometimes to recognize and say, no, okay, we're not good at this, or we've gone the wrong route, and have the lack of ego to just keep going sometimes when the writing's on the wall. So I really appreciate it, Mick, for that. And certainly the first time it happened in PrintOrigin, I nearly would have kept going for longer. And in kept going for longer, it would have been the wrong thing to do. So I really appreciate, Mick, for that. And we've done that a few times. But I just think... I forget what the question was now.
Well,
Conor,
I was talking about goals and whether you felt...
no. All right. We in all cases with goals, it's fantastic. All the time we're in business, Mick and I, we were great for each other in that quarterly we sat down and we did goals with each other and shared them with each other and beat each other up on if we didn't achieve it. They were in personal, there might be family, it might be personal development, it might be sports, it might be having fun. We had goals in all areas, and we met and sat down and did that on an ongoing basis. And then we had joint goals for the business in all cases, and we did have them. And if we look at the goals we had for Snap and the goals we had for Home Instead, genuinely, we reached those goals in both cases. We absolutely did, and in both cases they exceeded the goals we had from the start. As I say, that doesn't always happen and doesn't happen in every element of your life, but in both of those cases they did, and that kind of, and maybe Mick is a little like me in that it's almost like when we felt we'd done our bit and done it as good as we can. Even though we could have kept going in both cases, we almost felt like, okay, let's try something new and let's move on and let's develop a little bit further ourselves. And we were always kind of the idea we need to develop as people as well. So we did push each other and shove each other and challenge each other. And I suppose I'd just like to say that if there's anybody out there with a business, a soul on their own, lone wolf and whatever, God, I tell you, it's fantastic to be in a business where you have a like-minded person working with you. We didn't always agree. In fact, we certainly didn't agree on many times, but probably respected each other enough that we allowed each other to come up with different ideas. And what was great as well, I'm sure many times I come up with weird and wacky ideas, and Mick let me go ahead with them. Probably think they'll probably will fail, but you know what, let them off, and even if it costs 10 or 20 grand, it's not going to kill us. So let them off, let them go, and maybe 1 out of 3 of them will work, and we're good. So I think we respected each other when we made mistakes and whatever, and we weren't selfish with each other. We weren't kind of, well, I'm doing more work than you in the business, so whatever. We were never selfish, and there's times, Mick, contributed a lot more than I did, and there's times probably I did the same, but that's okay. But I must say, the value of having a friend, a partner in a business, was so valuable for me. And to me, Mick is a mentor as well as a friend, as well as a business partner, whatever. But it was so valuable, and I do see people in business at the moment. I'm seeing people at the moment that don't have that, and I would say to their detriment, that they don't have a right hand man or a right hand woman or someone to share the decisions with, in terms of maybe a crisis that's happening in the business, or it may be a big opportunity that they should invest in, and they don't have someone else that they can share the responsibility of maybe investing what could be big money. I had that, and I think it was hugely valuable.
Were you lucky to find each other? Because it's rare to find someone that you click with that well, I suppose,
Yeah.
and that you could work for, I don't know how long
Many
we
years.
were together for, but
Yeah.
yeah.
It probably is rare, Connor. It probably is rare. I would just genuinely say it's been the most important relationship I've ever had in my career, Mick, as a mentor, as a business partner, as a friend, as a shoulder to cry on, as someone to give me a kick in the arse when I needed it, whatever. I think it was so valuable. And yes, we were lucky to find each other. That's the way I feel about it. I think Mick feels the same. We were lucky to find each other, and I think it's valuable. But I think that sometimes people do come across such potential partners, and they don't recognize it, or I'm being honest, I think they're sometimes selfish, and they're not prepared to share the opportunity that there is and that they have, and they're just not prepared to, I suppose, work together with someone in such a close proximity and prepared to win and lose together, whatever. I think it is almost selfish, and I think it's really nice if you find someone like that, whether they're an equal partner or someone that you bring on board as a mentor, as a guide, or whatever. It's really cool to have that, and I value it hugely.
Why did you sell the business?
I think probably, first of all, in terms of Mick's case, is a few years older than me, and probably wanted to move on. And Mick was enjoying himself in manager of the Irish rugby setup, and probably started to run out of a little bit of interest. Loved home instead, loved staff, but in terms of day to day, said, okay, I can move on now. I was probably getting to a similar stage, probably not quite as close as Mick was, but at the same time, loved the idea of moving on. Loved the idea of being, okay, I don't want to be CEO anymore. I can move aside, put in a CEO, and I can be a founder and contribute to the company and whatever as well. So we were happy to get into the process, and we got an offer, and someone that wanted to buy into the business, was already in the business in Switzerland, and he came and said, look, I'd like to buy, and if you guys would like to sell. So we started with selling 60% and eventually sold the whole lot. We were good with that. We were happy to move on. I suppose we were happy, knowing that if we were paid, it probably put us in a nice financial position that we could, be able to get on with our lives and not be in a situation of need and whatever. So we both came out very nicely financially, and were able to get on with the rest of our lives, whatever that was. So we were happy to do that. And I think we're both the type of people that it's more about success than it is about money in both of our cases. There's no question about that. I love success. If money comes with that, then I'm good with that. But we wouldn't be seriously, we got to make a fortune, and we're not going to give up, and no matter what we're making, we want to make more. None of us are of that way of thinking. So we knew we did well, and so we were happy to come out. In Mick's case, he was on to a few other different things. In my case, I I knew I would want to do something more. I got some guidance from a few mentors that I talked to, and they basically said to me, um, so if you started one company, and we'd also in the meantime we'd started another franchise actually. I call it my sex shop, but it's CEX, of which there's about 45 of those around Ireland at the moment. So we started that as well, bought that franchise from the UK. We ran it for a couple of years, and again the someone wanted to buy it from us, and we were happy enough to sell it as well. So we're used to kind of starting. We're I suppose some people would call us starter uppers, and then move on. So we don't mind moving on. And in that case, we had started that. A few people said to me, "Look, so you go to just buy another franchise and you know grow it over 5 or 6 years, and just and sell again and do well and sell again." And someone said to me, "Why can't you do something different? Why can't you learn to play guitar? Why can't you do this, that, there?" So I did start learning to play guitar. Not that well, but I did it. They said, as one person said it to me, if you learn to play guitar or do something completely different, at least it'll stave off Alzheimer's for a few extra years. So I did that, and then I decided to start an innovation hub. That some of the learnings I had, that I'm from Wexford and passionate about Wexford, and I'm also passionate about the fact Ireland that we need to spread the infrastructure, the wealth, the economic potential success to the regions. And I worry about in Dublin choking up, and I at the same time I've seen parts of the country that are struggling to survive, and I see places like Wexford that I love, and so many of the young people emigrate to Australia or UK or Canada, or so many of them, about 10,000 of them every day drive from Wexford to Dublin or to Cork or to Waterford or whatever to work. So I decided to set up and start bringing inward investment and help companies develop in Wexford and the southeast, and create jobs for young people there so that they can live, they can work, they can play in Wexford rather than having to travel for their careers. And that's why I set up as a non-for-profit Greentech HQ, to try and help achieve that and create jobs in the southeast for the young people. And I'm working at that, and I love doing it. It's been the best job I've ever had. Don't get paid very well, but I'm loving it. I'm genuinely loving it, and it's a lovely to be able to give back to something that you feel passionate about and enjoy doing. So I'm doing that, and as I say, really enjoying it. But that's from the time I finished. I was happy to go off and do something a bit different than a franchise. And what was very interesting, Connor, this time when I started an innovation hub, and I just decided one day I'm going to do it. That's it. I'm going to do it. For once in my life, I had no system to work with. I had no structure. I didn't buy a franchise. I had no book to work on. So I basically set up, and I just had my goal to create X amount of jobs for young people in Wexford and the southeast. And I said, look, I'm going to trust, I suppose, my experience, my knowledge, my age, that I'll work this out eventually as to how to make it work as an operation. And I've reasonably done that. So I had to write the operations manual for once. Nobody else wrote it for me. But I suppose I had enough experience of operations manuals from other franchises and systematic business. So I had to come up with the concept. I had to create the system. I had to create a way, and I messed up on a number of things. I got it wrong. I had thoughts of ways of doing things that didn't really work. But eventually we got it to a place where it's now more than viable and growing and developing, and it's fun. It's great.
It was really interesting what you said a minute ago about that it's not really about kind of money and financial success. It's really about success. And I'm wondering, because yourself and Mick, you're not people that kind of shout about, what you're doing very loudly, or try and tell people, how successful you are, right? It's not really an external thing. You've had obviously recognition along the way. You were a finalist in the EY program a number of years ago and things like that. But it's not something you seem to kind of seek out. So I'm kind of wondering, when you say success, what does it mean to you?
Yeah. I suppose taking on, whether it's Snap, whether it's Greentech, whether it's Home Instead or whatever, I think, to me, if Mick and I, which we did sit down many times and set goals for success ourselves, and we always set the goals in ourselves, our family, and many parts of our lives, we set goals. To me, the success along the way has been how we reach those goals. Because sometimes you have to write goals. For instance, you might find a part of your life that if you're working your ass off in business at the expense of family, at the expense of your own, your own personal development, at the expense of, your health, at the expense of friends, and expense of enjoying life and whatever, then that's not success. That's only a success in a one element of your life. And many people can, if you decide to be success in any business, and you decide, I'm going to ignore my family now, I'm going to ignore my health, and I'm going to work 80 hours a week, and you work 80 hours a week, and the business works out well and starts making money, that's not success to me. That's just an element of it, and your life is completely lopsided. So to me, I suppose success is whatever your goals are as a person, in your life. How you work with people, how you work with your own community, how you work with your family, friends, the business. I liked I loved success in the business, because in franchising, some of the success that we liked in terms of success is how successful we made franchisees. Like if Conor Carney came to me, and as a young person, really ambitious, really wanting to grow, and I thought that he would fit into CEX or Contours Express or Snap, and I thought he'd fit in. I really took it as a personal goal to help you be successful, and that I really took you under my wing, and wanted to, because if you've now trusted me with your own career, your own family finances, and I got probably more satisfaction. Not probably, I know I did. I got more satisfaction out of helping franchisees succeed than, and I kind of recognized in the back of my mind, well, if I help enough of these succeed, I'll probably succeed myself. And I was good with that. So I all of my time in Snap or any of the other place, that's kind of an approach that I took. Help enough others, and the satisfaction you get out of seeing, a Conor Carney coming in who's new starting business, maybe new starting a marriage, new starting a life, trying to buy a house, whatever it is. The satisfaction you get out of helping someone start a business, grow a business, now making good money to look after his family, buy a house, all of that, is just enormous. It's just really, really enormous. Far more than, I made another 50 grand this year than I did last year. That pales into insignificance, genuinely. And I think that's the way Mick felt about it as well, that we genuinely helped a lot of people. We helped them. I would never say we helped them become millionaires or whatever, but we helped them on their way. We get them the guidance, the support, the systems, the structures, and that was hugely satisfactory. And that's probably why I'm doing what I'm doing now, because I'm helping other companies, not in a franchise system, but in a different system. And again, the satisfaction I get from, the people that come into Greentech at the moment, whether it's those SMEs. This time last week, I had that 24 tech founders come in and, giving them guidance on funding and all of this. And just to see the buzz in the room of everyone helping each other and whatever. I mean, I just look at it and look at them and think, I'm so happy I've set up this platform or place or space for them to come to hang out together and try and help each other succeed is just enormous to me.
A lot of people that come in here and are at the stage of their careers, like what you're at now, they would have similar values, but they seem to have learned it the hard way at some stage during their career. Was it a kind of just a natural progression for yourself and Mick, do you think? Or was there ever a point where you said, oh, that's actually not what I should be focusing on?
No, I think a natural progression. I don't think, particularly the franchises. I mean, if I taking your question, I mean, there was very little time in our career that, maybe the PrintOrigin was an example, that we just didn't have a clue, where the hell do we go from here with this business? We really don't know. In that case, we pretty well ran out of money to do what we needed to do. It was a fairly simple decision. I don't have the money to develop it any further, so we're done. In the franchises, it's reasonably laid out for you. If you do A to Z, you will succeed, unless you're a complete idiot. If you do what it says on the book, and if you're in a territory that has enough customers and you do what it says in the book, you're going to succeed. So, through those franchise systems, even when things were difficult, we kind of knew, we were able to work out how to handle those difficulties and move on. So we probably never had huge, periods of what the hell do we do now for over a period of a few years. What do we do? Whatever. We recently had it mapped out in terms of what to do and how to do it and whatever. No, it was really, I loved to start setting up Greentech a few years ago, because it really tested me that I had to have sleepless nights working. How the hell does this thing work? How do you make it work? How do you make it viable or whatever? I didn't know, but that was all right. It's much easier to be doing that at 60 years of age and 25 years of age and with no money in the bank and commitments and things like that. I didn't have those. I had, I suppose, the space and the capability of working it out over time and experiences, whatever, as well. So no, we didn't have, and I agree with you. I think it just we had the resources and the capability and the resources and the backup and the support for us to develop our business careers without much difficulty.
Do you have any regrets over the time, like I suppose over your career, generally speaking? Is there anything that you think about, I just wish I would have done that thing differently, or is there anything?
I know, Connor, I genuinely don't. I really don't. I'm answering that question real quick. You take the PrintOrigin, as a failure, let's say. I just think in your career, you almost like, I've started a number of businesses, and if you start a number of businesses, you're going to fail. You're going to fuck up. You really are. And you might as well, when you do, you might as well just take it on the chin and realize, it's going to happen. I got it wrong. I shouldn't have done it. I shouldn't have done it this way, that way, the other way, whatever it is. And try and learn from it and move on. So do I regret having done it? There's a number of things, a number of decisions I made, and we made other decisions, Mick and I and me individually, in terms of, buying this or getting into property here, there, and whatever, and thinking, what the hell was I thinking? Really, what was I thinking? And I suppose the biggest thing that probably came out of it for me and some of my experience, I actually kind of now have no great interest in investing in something that I don't have some kind of interest in. Like if someone comes and say, can you give me money? I want to develop this business or whatever. And I give them the money and I can neither help them or get involved in any way. I'm not really interested because, and I've nearly probably the other failures I've had it is when I just threw money into something and someone asked me and sounded a good salesperson and give it to them. But I wasn't able to look at it and mind it or keep an eye on it and whatever. And people just didn't treat my money like whatever they would treat their own, let's say. So I'd have no interest in really that anymore. I will invest in a few companies that I can help, either me or I can give some help in some way, shape or form. I don't mind getting involved that way. But otherwise I'd had no real interest in just throwing money at something and hoping for the best. So yes, I have made mistakes and a few, few real fuck ups that you look back and you think, what was I thinking? And usually, by the way, it's because you're not thinking. It's usually because you're too busy doing this, that, and the other thing. Someone comes and say, I need money for this, that, and the other thing. And you don't have time to do due diligence on what you're doing. You don't have time to think about what you're doing. You just say, okay, look, I'll throw it in and hope for the best. And most of those have not worked out for me, to be honest. So, but, am I pissed off that I, made big mistakes or I wouldn't do it again or whatever? I probably would do it again. I'm the type of person that if I went back again, I'd probably do it all over again. I'd make the same mistakes. And I mean, I think if you're an entrepreneur, you often do take bets on things that really you shouldn't be doing. But, it's just part of, I suppose, who I am. So I'm not going to have any regrets about it, to be honest. I certainly don't have any regrets. And, I've given money away sometimes to people I shouldn't have given it to. No question about that. But I doubt if there's many entrepreneurs that have started a number of businesses and haven't done the same thing. And you just have to say, okay, you win some, you lose some. But I also have the philosophy that you win some, you lose some. That, you know what, if you start a number of businesses, that overall, unless you're an idiot and you don't learn a little bit along the way, you almost have to have the losses to have the wins. You kind of have to allow yourself that and don't beat yourself up that much when you have the losses. And I don't think it's not that you're an idiot. Sometimes you just haven't put the effort into making that thing work or haven't done the due diligence in the first place. And you haven't maybe asked yourself the question, why the hell am I doing this? Why the hell am I investing in fucking property in Bulgaria? That I'd never been to Bulgaria, have no interest in going to Bulgaria and all this type of thing. And, we've all done stupid things like that. We've all done them. And you just have to give yourself a break on those type of things and just say, okay, just a bad day at the office. That's about all.
Ed Murphy, it's been a pleasure having you in today. Thank you so much for giving the time. What does the future hold for Greentech HQ and everything else that you're doing?
The future, the future will be great for it. I've found someone who's now the CEO, so I've been able to step out of the day-to-day role. It took me too long. It took me 2.5 years. I usually try to do it quicker. So this time I have someone else in charge, and he's amazing guy, amazing entrepreneur himself, and he's working in that, and it's great. Anyone working in it are entrepreneurs. It's nicely viable now at this stage. We have run a number of programs that, while it is a non-for-profit, it's viable, financially viable, and it will be into the future. We will continue to take on different programs that will run for startups and scale-ups in the Southeast, and that will keep going. I mean, to me, I'm I've invested in it. I won't be taking any money back out of it. I haven't taken money out of it as I've done so far. I'm just happy that it has now created a formal infrastructure in Wexford for startups and scale-ups, that they have a place and a space and an ecosystem to come to learn and to grow and work together. I know that it will create hundreds of jobs. into the future. And so I'm glad about that. So I'm glad I've got that going and whatever. We Out of it, I've invested into a couple of companies. One of the companies I've invested into out of Greentech, out of Wexford, is extremely successful at the moment and growing very well. So that'll pay the bills into the future. So I'm happy about that. I'm also, as part of that, I've taken on the role as president of the County Wexford Chamber of Commerce, and I'm working on a number of very large projects for Wexford that'll help. It'll help Wexford become more economically successful than it is, and particularly in the green tech area, renewable energy area, offshore wind area, solar area. There's many potential opportunities there, and I see it as a place that I can continue to help with and try and establish the Southeast as as, let's say, the sustainability capital of Ireland, and I have a cluster of companies in that whole renewable energy area. So that's something I'm working on. But to be honest, I'm more working on it, but almost creating an infrastructure with people, put people in place and systems and structures in place that will happen naturally. And into my old age, I can look back and say, well, I've helped create that. And that's all I care about, really. I'm more than happy that it's well on its way at the moment.
Ed Murphy, thank you so much for coming in. It's been a pleasure and I've learned a huge amount. So we wish you the very best of luck with Greentech HQ and everything else that you're doing. And we'll see you. See you.
Okay, Connor, can I one last
Of
one
course.
last one? And the one last one is thank you for doing this. And I genuinely appreciate what you're doing and doing the podcasts with other people, because I do find that and particularly business people, successful or otherwise, with something to offer, needs to be highlighted. Their stories need to be highlighted, because that'll give it'll give motivation and interest for other young entrepreneurs. And I think Ireland, more than anything, needs entrepreneurs at the moment. I think we need to reduce our dependence on foreign direct investment, and we need to create indigenous Irish companies and help get many more startups off the ground. So what you're doing in the podcast is really valuable. So thank you for that. The last thing I want to say is just a little ask, and that is the ask is this, that because we're helping a lot of SMEs and startups, I really need more and more subject matter experts. That could be in AI, it could be in lean, it could be in marketing, it could be in strategy. So if there's any entrepreneurs or any experts out there in their field that can give some of their time pro bono, that could be a couple of hours once a quarter, either online or whatever, to some of the SMEs that we're looking after, I would really appreciate it. So if anyone can call me Ed Murphy in Greentech HQ, Connor can let you know where to go. But greentechhq.com or Ed Murphy, let me know. I would love to have you just to contribute to some ambitious young startups or ambitious SMEs. I'd really love to have any support that I can get.
Excellent. We'll put it in the show notes and the contact details and everything else. So Ed, thank you very much for doing
Thanks,
it.
Connor. Thank you.